Hi, my name's Alyssa, and I will be reading Matthew 27, verses 45 through 56. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, Jesus came over all the land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? When some of those standing there heard this, they said, he's calling Elijah. Immediately, one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine vinegar, put it on a staff, and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him. And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rock split, and the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, surely he was the Son of God. Many women were there, watching from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. So today is a day that we refer to as Good Friday in Holy Week. I remember growing up and I would often get Black Friday and Good Friday confused and not really understand why this day of death and mourning and anguish and pain we called good. And so, of course, my younger, maybe more naive mind would say, oh, surely that's the one that's Black Friday, and Good Friday is the one where we get to go out and buy a lot of things that are on super sale. But that's not actually what it was. And as I grew older, I started to understand a little bit more why we as Christians consider this day good, and this actually this whole weekend good. And so I had to learn more about the history of this idea of atonement and sacrifice. And actually in the Old Testament, when people would sin or when they would fall short of God's perfection or his perfect image, they were required to give up a living sacrifice of usually a living animal, and only once a year could the highest priest enter the Holy of Holies, this holy room where God's presence was always there on this one day, and that was only the Day of Atonement. And so once a year, the highest of the high priests could be in God's presence. Besides that, people were very dependent on the priest and the leaders of the law in order to gain their spiritual wisdom and their direction from the Lord. But Jesus knew his place and knew his role on this earth while he was here. He often says he came not to be saved, but to save, and not to be served, but to serve. And so he knows that this, in his position, where he is on this cross, he knows this is what his life has all come to, and this has been the point of his entire life. And so he calls out to God and he says, why have you forsaken me? Because he knows, like, God, Father, I know this is my duty, but it hurts and this is awful. And dying on a cross is not only one of probably the most painful deaths, but also one of the most humiliating deaths that he could have died in this time period. But when I chose to read this Matthew's recount of this event happening, because he specifically mentions the curtain that was torn. And that curtain refers back to that Day of Atonement in the Holies of Holies, where only the highest priest could see God and could hear God and be with God. And so it's so important that Matthew made sure to recognize that occurrence, because that is why this is good news. This is good news because the veil was torn, the curtain was torn, and now we as Christians, we as sinners and Gentiles, have full access to the Lord, and we have full access to everything that he is and does and will do. And so Jesus is that bridge. And so my younger naive self couldn't comprehend this idea of why is a day of death so good? But it's because this is the start of the good news. This is the start of the gospel. This is the start of Jesus' testimony and the truth that comes when we decide to follow Jesus. If he hadn't died on the cross, we would still be sinners. We would still be living in the old law and the Old Testament ways and rules and regulations, and they were tough. There are a lot of things that we do today on a normal day, don't think of it at all, that would have been considered sinful under the old law. And so the good news is that a perfect man died a death that we deserved, just so that we could have forgiveness of our sins that we commit every single day. A man that was perfect, flawless, sinless, died for us. And as we continue to learn more about his story in this weekend, we'll see what happens moving on from now. But will we just go into this weekend praising and thanking God for the sacrifice of his perfect son for us on a cross, a humiliating and painful way to die? Thank you.